We are talking about shadow work and the end of things as we know it and understand it and how it could possibly be a gift. When at some point in time, I can't say necessarily when I began, but many years ago, and I'm hoping to get my original Facebook restored, I had a group called Selenite and Sage, currently covered in cats. I love that, Tiffany. And Selenite and Sage was my spiritual counseling um, business name, coaching, what have you, right? And at that time, there was this wonderful feature on not Snapchat, but there's something that's like Snapchat. I can't even remember. You see how long I've been doing things and just randomly. Um, God. Anyway, there was this thing, it's the video chatting thing, and they allowed you to do like groups. So I used to do shadow work journal prompts, right? I would go live, leave a little video message, and people would do that. We had a whole season of just opening up with shadow work. And shadow work was introduced to me 1,000 lifetimes ago, it feels like. Um, when you're doing like parts work, right? And the id, the ego, the super ego are those foundations and founding people of psychology. And then as I moved on and did IFS work and stuff, I was like, this is really great. This is really great. And for a long time, and even still, right? Like the Desiree B. Stevens motto logo is it's all shadow work because it is. So this morning, that is what we are going to get into. So get comfy, write down some notes, get some water, do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself because we're going to go and get into something. Good morning, Kate. Oh my God, I need to talk to you. Please remind me after this. Text me. Okay. So, three talking points, right? One, colonial Christianity created a collective shadow. Right. So we're going to be talking about that because we're tying it to our arc of I Want to Wish You an Astrological Christmas and discussing how Christianity as we know it today is a colonized version of what it began as, right? A revolutionary spiritual practice. And it just was taken over by empire, and here the hell we are. Two, Decolonization is grief work, not just reclamation. This is super important. I've always said that this is trauma work, this is grief work. You have to allow yourself to feel the loss of the things that you have lost. Your connection to community, your connection to your own self, to your indigenous language, right? We're all indigenous to somewhere. I do not want anybody to feel like they're not, very specifically white body people. As you came into anti-racism work, anti-oppression work, you learned of the indigenous here in Turtle Island. Congratulations. That's wonderful. That's super needed. But I want you to continue to be going deeper and think about the indigenous across the globe. Land back is a global idea. Indigeneity is a global idea. And you were indigenous to somewhere. Specifically, if you call yourself white today, you have been colonized, my friend, because you were not always white. One of the more popular questions that I've asked, and maybe kind of TikTok famous when it did, was who were you before you were white? Like what? Yeah, yeah. White did not always exist until the 1600s. That's something to sit with. That's something to unpack. There is grief in that, losing all your connection to your land, to your people, to your spiritual practices, to your language, to your food, to your traditional clothes, to the way you lived. All of that, right? Supremacy culture separates us from ourselves, from each other, from community and land, right? Lisa says, we got to get you Brian Halpin. Who the hell is that? Now I got to Google. Don't be ADHDing me. ADHDing me. Brian Halpin. Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll continue to look on. Anyway, three. Talking point three. See, I almost got lost. This is how that works. Talking point three. Shadow work is collective because colonization was, friend. Colonization is not something that just happened to Black people, brown people. Okay, that is a really bad misnomer that I've noticed that happens, and I'm like, this is why I'm like, white people. How are you going to help free anybody when you haven't freed yourself? When you haven't even accepted your own colonization, what you lost in the creation of Christianity, in the creation of whiteness as a system. You see what I'm saying? Like, you gotta sit with that, like, "Oh, this is a me thing, right? This is something that I've experienced," and sit with that experience. Good morning, Deirdre. You have to sit with that experience. You have to recognize, you have to sit with what your ancestors lost to become white, to assimilate into whiteness for survival. Some chose it with glee. Others were forced into it, right? And this is where you get that struggle of white body people feeling like, "Oh, no, I'm not white. I'm a non-practicing white. I am insert ethnic identity." And that's wonderful inside your home, right? You could be whatever you want at your grandma's house. That does not mean that is how the world would treat you. Again, race as a construct treats you how you are perceived. Period, point blank, full stop. And how you are perceived will determine how these systems of oppression will impact you. It's just that simple. Lisa says he does a whole podcast called Before We Were Right. Ooh, I definitely want to talk with him. I love that for him and me. That's a possibility. Gonna put that out there. All right. So let's get into it. Talking point one, colonial Christianity created collective shadow. Colonization didn't just steal land and culture. Christian empire buried grief in the name of salvation. Colonial Christianity required suppression to survive and to dominate. Listening, right? It's not easy to hear, right? But we're trying to get to the core of certain wounds, and that's okay. It's going to be tough, but you got this and you could do it, right? So, colonial Christianity required suppression to survive and to dominate in the name of saving souls, right? We have like the Crusades and we have, the proselytizing, knocking door to door. There is a moral, because I'm using that term very loosely, there's a moral obligation to convert people. This is the only religion that does that. I want you to think about that. This is the only religion that will go out, seek people to convert into their religion. And historically has brought violence when you did not convert globally. Okay. That is a reality. That is the truth. That is uncomfortable, but it is what it is, right? So, all in the name of saving souls, civilizing the heathen, right? Wherever that was, that is not a new term, but civilization means conquered by Rome. Like, I think that's what civilized means. It means to be conquered by Rome, which is the Roman Empire, which is the Roman Catholic Church. That's how that arc went. Okay. And preparing for the end times. Entire people groups were forced to abandon ancestral memories, embodied spirituality, grief rituals, relational ways of knowing God and the world. What could not be expressed through Christianity was grief, rage, doubt, longing. All of that was buried, right? You are supposed to meet all of this with joy, with glee, and not, this is salvation. This is so much better than what you had. We saved your soul. You were a savage. You were a heathen. You were uncouth, unkempt, unclean. And look at you, washed in the blood. Yeah, that's intense. So, what that buried didn't disappear. What happened is it became a shadow, right? That longing. When you sit down and think about Christianity and all of the sects, I have a lisp, so sometimes that sounds like sex. That is not what I'm saying. It is sect. Different factions, if you will, of Christianity, right? Off the top of my head, you have Catholicism, Protestantism, Presbyterian, Baptist, Kojic, Jehovah's Witness, yeah, there was that was 7 just off the top of my head, right? There are thousands of different variations of Christianity. What that tells me is that there is a longing for what was lost. That is that collective shadow. Because if there was just one right way, of doing Christianity and Christ is the savior, there would not need to be so many different variations of it, right? But people were trying to go back to their indigeneity. People were trying to go back to their spiritual practices and trying to make sense of what happened to it. And generationally, that shifted into various factions and where we are right now. Susan says we are seeing this today in Christian nationalism. We are indeed, right? It is rearing that head again. And this is what happens. I remind people is like when there is a dying, right? There's a holding on, right? There's a thrashing about, there's a refusal because we do not embrace grief. We do not embrace death as an entire um, culture. And so there is a fighting and a hanging on. And that is, in my opinion, what we see with the rise of Christian nationalism, with the Project 25, with the aberrant laws that are just being flung about with the flick of a pen. This is like trying, like grasping for straws. But when you look toward the future and you start looking at the youth, and I love them. I love them so damn much. They are so amazing and wonderful, and they know where they're going, and they're questioning things and unpacking stuff, and they are dealing with that collective shadow, and they are doing their shadow work in the most amazing, bold ways. And that is so important to recognize and focus on. This over here is going to do what it needs to do. But as we are building community and growing towards decolonization and healing and what that looks like, right? Building those parallel systems, we need to be looking ahead and following the guidance of them, right? Like, oh, that's what you're trying to do? Okay, let me add a little expertise, a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of age and time with it and work with them. Lisa says the Spanish standing in the middle of the field, shouting their decree of conversion in a language that the indigenous people didn't understand before they set out to murder them. That part, right? I mean, I went to church when there was still readings in Latin. There's so much like why did we learn Roman numerals? Why do we have a Colosseum? Why do we have the Olympics? There are just so many ties to that Roman Empire that is wild. I am 46. There's no reason in hell or heaven or earth that I needed to learn anything in Latin. like I- you don't even know what these people are saying, right? You're being indoctrinated into something that you don't even fully understand, therefore cannot give consent to, which goes right back to this entire shtick is a non-consensual situation, right? I can't give an enthusiastic yes to something I don't understand. I, I don't know what you just said. I, it's not a language people speak, let alone I, right? So all of those sorts of things, right? So today that shadow shows up as perfectionism framed as holiness, right? Those one of those 15 pillars of supremacy culture, right? Like cleanliness is next to godliness, as perfect as we could get, we are holier than thou, all of those sorts of things. Disconnection from the body framed as morality. We've all learned about how tainted our bodies are, right? They are sinful out the gate. Imagine being born into this idea of sin, like your body is awful and terrible. And there are ways um, to unpack that when you do your own decolonizing of God and your faith. Because again, my goal with this series is not to take away anyone's faith. It is to question it. It is to sit down and say, why do I do this? What is this fulfilling inside of me, right? If sin is separation from God, then colonization is a sin, right? Because when you separate people from their divinity, from their own intrinsic worth and divinity, that is a sin. If we're talking about sinning, it also leads into spiritual bypassing, framed as faith, right? We talked about that last week. Like, oh, it's all going to work out. Maybe it will, but for some, it does not, right? We cannot just sweep things underneath the rug and not actually meet it with true faith, whatever that faith looks like. But it can't just be, oh, it'll be fine. There's a divine plan. There is a divine plan, but divine plans have been interrupted deeply by colonization and men like as people, like the group, humans. in and of themselves. It also shows up as internalized inferiority and superiority framed as divine order. Okay. We literally have decades, centuries of people being better than, right? I've shared with you guys, I am Irish American, and the whole thing inside of Ireland was Catholics versus Protestants. It was a white body people, British against the Irish, right? Um, with religious wars. Right. So there was a separation amongst white body people as well. And Christianity tried to create a system that can control all bodies globally because it got too big for itself, right? Like you could only conquer but so many lands and control but so many things if you don't have your finger on the pulse. Your finger on the pulse is easily created when you have a system. When you see that people are already practicing these sorts of things, it's easier to turn around and say, "Oh, you're doing solstice, you're doing Yule. I love that. Here's Christmas." Right? Like, and it's not easy. Right now, we're also in the season of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, folks. Very sorry about the loss in Australia on yesterday, which I believe was the first day of Hanukkah. And you're talking about people with thousands of years of persecution who maintain spiritual practices. That is not easy to do inside of a Christian empire. There's so much to unpack with how Christianity at its core is anti Semitic. And I mean that across the board. Islamophobic, anti-Jewish people, like across the board, anti-Semitic at its very core in its creation. Again, it's truth. It's uncomfortable. Take a breath. It's not heavy. I mean, it's not easy. It is heavy. Hey, lefty professor, friend. All right. So reminding yourself that this is not a moral failure. Good morning, Melissa. This is the inheritance of colonial Christianity. I am very mindful of calling it what it is because people will get activated. Oh, Christianity is not about that. I know. I know that Christianity as it was intended to be, Christianity as it was framed and formed and creating in the beginning, it was not supposed to be. But that has long been lost. An empire has taken over, and we are living in colonial Christianity. We are no longer living in the teachings of Christ. Okay? If we were living in the teachings of Christ, you guys wouldn't be anti Semitic because Jesus was a Jew. Yeah. It always killed me when I was doing religious studies that people did not get into like the Torah or understanding Jewish teachings. I'm like, if you like Jesus, why would you not want to know what he grew up learning? Did, did you not want to follow his ways of being? Wouldn't his lifestyle, his living, his ways of thinking, his revolutionary being be a core part of your teachings then? Because you want to live a Christ-like life, then you would need to know those teachings. Okay, more coffee. Hey, we're going to move into talking point two. Lisa says I'm a pagan and my husband is Jewish. Ooh, I love that. Tell him I said happy Hanukkah. I think that there is a beautiful overlap. We could talk about that because I will go ADHD. I love that. Talking point two, decolonization is grief work, not just reclamation. Too often in this type of work, it's all of this beauty. And I do believe it's a remembering, it's a reclamation, it is a going back to. I often tell people, listen, you already know this. This exists inside of your body. My job, my privilege, my joy is reminding you that you know that, right? Bringing it to the forefront, making something awaken, spark, and you're like, oh, yes. Let's keep going. That is beautiful. As you should. Lisa says, I'm learning the Talmud and the Tanakh. And I'm like, yeah, why? Like, it was something. I mean, I'm an autodidact, and it was definitely something that I dug into and then sought counsel on in various times and parts of my life through Jewish friends, Jewish teachings, rabbis, etc. Because again, if you are having wanting to have a Christ-like experience, it just makes sense to learn, right? Like if you wanted to learn how to speak Spanish, your best thing is to immerse yourself in a Spanish culture. It's just, those are my thoughts, friends. So decolonization is grief work, not just reclamation. We don't just get to take things back, right? And because that in and of itself is a colonizing way of coming towards things. Like, oh, well, this is mine because I am German, because I am Irish, because I am Russian. And it's like, yes, and so many things have been lost and moved, and we still need to sit with that grief of what has been lost and approach the people that have been closer to it with reverence and respect. It's not just yours because you say it's yours. It's not just yours because of lineage. It is yours because you honor it. It is yours because it is a part of who you are and you come at it with reverence and respect. And to those who have not lost it, there is something so beautiful about being able to have fought 800 years of colonization and still speak your Irish language. I follow Irish speakers, like native Irish speakers, and I am just amazed at that, right? I wouldn't go and learn Gaelic and then be like, oh, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's beautiful that you are reclaiming that, but also that balance is sitting with the grief that you should have never lost it in the first place. It should have never been taken from you in the first place. It should have never been made illegal to speak your own language in the first place. Right. And sitting with that will have you reclaiming things in a respectful way, in an ancestral way, in a way that honors your people that lived, died, fought, and still exists in this day through you and through others, trying to help you get back to where you were. Good morning, Snow Rover. So, do. Liberation isn't just reclaiming what was taken, it's mourning what can't be returned. Some of it is just lost. Some of it will never return to us again. And that in and of itself is a pain. And it is a pain point that we have got to acknowledge in our own bodies, in our lineage, all throughout. Some of it is just not coming back. And that is heavy, very heavy. Colonial Christianity promised an escape, right? Heaven later, salvation later, justice later. Everything had to happen right now. You toiled now for a later life, for a promise of something that you may never see. That is a wild concept. But decolonization interrupts that timeline. Decolonization asks us to grieve what was stolen in the name of God, in the colonial Christian God that we now serve. What was never passed down because it was burned, banned, or beaten out. When I think of the Vatican being a completely and utterly sovereign place inside of a country, I love the concept. Um, like you need a passport to get in the Vatican. You can't just walk into that like a museum or anything. It is its own entity with its own laws and ways of existing inside of a country. That is wild. And when I think of all of the artifacts, and I'm loving that they're giving things back, right? There is a cleansing, there is a return, there it's happening. And we're not going to turn around 2,000 years of something in an instant, right? 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, but it is happening. But when you think of the Vatican and you think of all of the things that are housed there, all of the artifacts, all of the truths of who they took from, all of the lands and people that they colonized, tribes and people that will never return, languages that will never resurface, practices that are lost forever. Grief work. Lisa says St. Jerome wrote the Vulgate stating in 382 AD, and he picked what words to use in translating. Yup. Yes. So much yes. And we get into that in the other episodes. I think Wednesdays we start. I don't know. But somewhere in there, we do talk about that and the various translations of the Bible, going from the Vulgate to the Greek to the English and to King James. It's not that far. King James is the cousin of the Queen of Elizabeth that just died. It's not- the Bible that we use now has been altered in a lifetime that we can conceive. There's a lot. There is so much. There is just so much to just uncover, unpack, and process, right? So decolonization interrupts that in real time, right? It asks us to grieve what was stolen in the name of God, what was never passed down because it was burned, banned, or beaten out, and what we had to become to survive Christianity's version of righteousness. All of that loss is grief. There is joy in reclamation, but there is also grief, and you have got to sit with both sides of that coin. The grief is layered because it is personal, it is generational, and it is collective, right? There are things that you're going to sit with that you lost, that you're sitting there like, wow, how many friends did I push away because of having this ideology, this belief system? Generationally, what did my people lose? Again, language, your own spiritual practices. What collectively have we lost? And all of that, when you really sit with that grief, when you're really doing that work of reclamation, when you're really doing that shadow work, you start seeing how interconnected we actually are and how much we all have lost, woefully lost in the colonial project that we know today, right? And what does it look like to reclaim parts of ourselves, parts of our ancestry, parts of our collectiveness, right? There's a collectivism that has to be reclaimed, but it cannot be reclaimed without that grief. You have to grieve the process. I'm going to take some more coffee. Grief is especially painful when we are letting go of productivity as worth, right? That is a Protestant inheritance, right? When they came and they were like that Protestant work ethic, like working hard, idle hands is for the devil's work. That is absolutely religious indoctrination from their belief system, right? Which is wild because the Protestants are the wasps that created this business of America that we're in, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which were wealthy, aristocratic, British, Spaniards, etc. Folks who then decided how others should toil and work for their benefit. See what I'm saying? All of it is like folded into it, right? And so, like, you working hard and toiling for damn near nothing for bare survival is your godly duty. It is your work. Why would you not want to do this? This is how you earn your way into heaven. Everything has been framed through productivity. So what happens is when we can no longer produce. Now, there's various reasons why we can no longer produce. We could become disabled, we get elderly, we get pregnant. Like, there's a lot of things that says that my worth, our worth collectively, is not as valuable because you cannot produce. And when you have that sort of a model, and then you add capitalism and you add an enslavement, slavery economy to it, you have a huge mixture for exploitation and harm, right? You start adding race into that mix and saying who is worth even being worth production, and you have a major issue. You start adding gender into that, and you start seeing how there is value systems that are absolutely harmful and violent. You start adding age into it, right? Like, these talking about people that put children down chimneys. Like, I don't know exactly where we want to go as a society when we refuse to recognize that these are people that put children down chimneys for chimney sweeps. These are people that created an entire slave economy. Where do you want to go if you refuse to dismantle it? How do you think that that type of a system can be reformed? These are people that put humans on pikes, beheaded people, ate people. Where do you go from there? There's no reformation, my friends. I tell you this often, and this is just a reminder. If you are here because you think I want to reform this, you are wrong. And this is not the space for you to be in. I want to be building parallel systems and dismantling the entire shit show. There is no reformation. This is thousands of years of harm, pain, violence, extraction, and it just needs to go away. It needs to dissolve. And any business can be dissolved, right? And America's a business. It can be dissolved. And if we are doing this work here because we have the global chokehold on colonization, everybody would fall in line. That is absolutely the entire point of doing it so much here in this land, because this is basically the crown. This is the Roman Empire reestablished. And therefore, everything that trickles out is a product of what we are doing here. And if we shift that, the world will shift and it will take its time, but it will. Okay, let's see. Another grief of letting go is religious certainty, the comfort of knowing the end. When you have a religion that tells you that that the end times are coming, right? You have chills. Oh, I hope they're good chills. I hope they're confirming chills. I hope they are saying that this is truth and resonating in your body. When you serve a religion, a God that believes in the end of time, you will 100% get end of time shit. Like you're right, because the end of time promises a new beginning. The end of times, the prophecy is like all of this will come to an end and we will all live in this utopian heaven with the returning of Christ. That shit sounds lit. Like, so what do we got to do to make that happen? Right. So you get land clearings, you get genocides, you get murders, extractions, enslavement. You get those things. You will get diseases. I don't care if you have to make it up. You will, because you are trying to usher in that time period. Right. If we served a religion that didn't have an end of time thing, right, you wouldn't need to produce those. You wouldn't need to manufacture those situations, right? If we served in a religion where everybody believed that we should all be free to exist, that there were various identities, that we could value children and elderly, and we could live and coexist. Do you see the difference? You're going to have a completely and utterly different outcome. But with this idea of the end of times, right, where we're watching Christian nationalism rise, where we're seeing Project 25 come into fruition, that whole entire arc coming to an end, of course it is. Because that's the end of time doctrine. It needs to happen in order for us to get to this peaceful place, right? So you will root for evil, even because you're going to get it, it's worth the cost. Because in the end of times, when it all comes down to it, we're going to wind up in this beautiful utopian space. We're going to be reunited with our loved ones and all of the doctrine that we have been fed, so we can ignore all of the harm that it takes to get there. I've not read Handmaid's Tale, but Handmaid's Tale, from what I have gleaned from it, is really just a white person's tale of what has happened to Black and brown people across the globe. Like, no, I haven't, because I'm assuming the what is towards the Handmaid's Tale. It is I won't read it or participate in it because that is what it is. White people have superimposed themselves into this space of like, oh my God, this is going to happen, as if it has not been happening globally to Black and brown people in their own lifetime. So, yeah, it makes my ass itch. Like, no. It's a no for me, but I love that people can find something to resonate and for it to make sense, I guess. But it's a huge no for me, because they consistently bypass that. Hi, this has been happening, right? And before it happened to Black and brown people, it was happening to white-bodied people when Christianity was running through Europe, colonizing it. Lisa says, "Yep, that's what I was going to say next." Yes, that is another whitewash telling. Yeah, and it focuses on misogyny. It focuses on, uh, you know, it misses the mark for me. It misses the mark for me. I know it focuses on a lot of different things, and I think that it could have just been more layered. I think that there could have been more of a disclaimer on these things have already happened, right? Like it's not about to. It's not, oh, we are walking into this season. It is, we have been in this season. It is just coming back around to white body people, right? It is, we are just like full circle snake eating itself for me. Um, Also, white supremacy's false promise of safety through alignment, right? That is one of the things that colonial Christianity gave white body people, right? If you align yourself with white supremacy, you will be saved. You know, the Ku Klux Klan is a Christian organization. Do I need to say more? It is literally a Christian organization. The women of the Klan is a Christian organization. I don't have much to say after that. I'm going to just sit with that. The Ku Klux Klan and the women of the Klan are considered Christian organizations. There we go. Susan said so many layers to that. Yeah, to the to both things, I'm assuming. Tiffany says the KKK recruited new members through pastors at the pulpit. Yeah, like it was like, church meetings. Like this is like we should go kill people and praise the Lord. That's the ammunition. You know what I'm saying? So there's just like a lot because it's forced assimilation. Again, back to this is a non-consensual system. So it's always going to force you. You want to be closer to God. You want to be safer in this situation. Then you need to align yourself with X, Y, and Z. And that is in and of itself non-consensual, right? Like a gun pointed to your head is not a choice. Not a choice at all. So the reframe that I offer here is grief is not a sign that something is wrong. It is evidence that something mattered. Something mattered. Something mattered. Last week we talked about, like grief as a form of love, a recognition. Like we grieve things because love existed there, and it does not anymore, or it does in a different sort of way. Taylor says, I have a deep grief for all my asking as a child, challenging ESP Protestant BS. Who said, why, who gets what? No liberatory connections made for that loving, curious girl. Decades after being good at surviving all that white supremacy culture, I am finding my way and experience each glimpse of what could have been with a pang and resolve. And I love that you are doing that work because it is not easy. It is so much easier to ignore what is going on, what is being told, because we have to face that grief, right? We have to, all of us, we have to face the harm that we caused to people that we loved and that we cared about in the process of being aligned with supremacy culture, whatever parts of it that you were aligned with, right? And it does take resolve. And it takes a deep grief and a sitting with, and it takes that big release of shame, right? I talked about that on the Saturday liberation lesson. It's loud, but it's not honest. And shame is yet another colonial Christian concept. Again, look at children. Children have zero shame. None. None. You want to know if shame is real, a real emotion? Watch a toddler. Shame does not exist, right? It is a construct to keep you small, to keep you uninvolved, to keep you unevolved. Right. Because if I'm going to sit down and say that this is a moral failing on my part, I was so wrong. These thoughts that I held, oh, woe is me. I'm going to isolate more. And supremacy culture needs that isolation so you can live inside of that individualism, so you could operate with that either or thinking, those binaries, that defensiveness, only one right way, they all fall into each other. So that shame is something that's going to have to definitely be released as you're moving through your grief work, right? Like, again, what is what? It's pretty neutral. These are truths. These are facts. And accountability does not need shame. It needs honesty. So, grief isn't the opposite of liberation. It's the doorway out of empires, theology, and into embodied truth. The reflection that I offer you guys here is what beliefs or identities are you grieving as you unlearn colonial Christianity? Vantage Point says, wow, interesting idea. So we can apply this to religion? Yeah. This whole thing here, welcome. This is my last year's series on I Want to Wish You an Astrological Christmas. And I am rerunning it back this year because last year I wasn't doing lives. So this way you could read it and you could hear my thoughts on it and you could ask questions if need be. So, yes, these anything that I offer can be applied to every and any aspect of your life because that is what decolonization is. It is questioning every single part that you have been handed by supremacy culture, dissecting it, and choosing what you're going to keep from it. Nobody's saying, last Friday I had Shanae on here and we were talking about intentional relationships and intentional relating, community building, decolonizing your spirituality and polyamory and how that applies to relationships. Nobody's saying that polyamory is the way and monogamy is not. That would be either or. That's one of those 15 pillars of supremacy culture, or that would be only one right way. What we are saying is question everything. Question everything and decide where you land. You may turn around and say, you know what? I thought about it. I get where monogamy comes from. I don't love the way that it has been framed in colonial Christianity inside of the nuclear of the family and how it separates us and other thing. But it is the relationship style that I like. Right? It's just about questioning. Susan says, being the persecuted and the persecutor needs relief from shame. This went away. And safe spaces like this. Oh, thank you. That is the goal. I do talk about the grief that comes with being the oppressor, right? There's nothing joyful about unless you actively want to be an oppressor, unless you're like, fuck yeah, this is what I want to do. I hate people and I want to oppress them. There is a very real grief that comes with being the oppressed and the oppressor. Right. And both sides need that recognition and both sides need to release shame in another lifetime. I was on a podcast episode. I wonder if I could find it on YouTube. My friend Danny interviewed me and we were talking and I was unpacking my own identities of being both Irish and Black American and how the origin stories are handed to you. And there is supposed to be some shame around being a descendant of chattel slavery. And I'm like, I have no shame in that. People get captured. Life has happened in that way in colonization. And I am proud to be of such a resilient people. I'm still here. I'm still Black. Same with being Irish. 800 years of colonization, friend. Saying that you're Irish is a pride point because if it was up to the British, we wouldn't exist, right? So when you can sit down and dissect all of those parts, right? And recognize that you are both of those things. Even in my Blackness, I still oppress someone else, right? I oppress my children. I talk about that, right? As an adult inside of these hierarchies, as a more light skinned as a mixed Black woman, right? There are spaces that I could move in that more unambiguously monoracially Black women cannot. That is a form of oppression. I have to sit with that. That is a very real thing that we need to do. So I hope and I'm thankful that this feels like a space to do that because that is the intent. Hold on, because I have comments, but it goes. Vantage Point says, so religion is just a construct that has certain supremacy attached to all its teachings. Yes, short answer. Good morning, Sam. Oh, there we go. I got it to expand a little bit more. I am cold. And I'm like, I'm saying that, but I'm in a crop top. My hands are more cold than anything else. Okay, anyway. So the reflection prompt that is offered here is what beliefs or identities are you grieving as you unlearn colonial Christianity? What feels destabilizing, not because it's wrong, but because it no longer guarantees safety, right? Sam says, I want to stop oppressing myself. And you should. And you should. And you should. And I'm going to say to stop oppressing yourself, you have to release shame, right? Because we oppress ourselves quite usually through shame, which is, again, another colonial construct, right, of Christianity, self flagellation, right? I'm bad. I should repent, right? Uh, just the torture that comes of the self torture that comes with shame. how do I, just the repentance idea, right? Like, repent from what? From being human, from being a victim of colonization. I can't repent from that, right? I can sit down and I can turn around and say, wow, I have been harmful to myself, to others, and I am working on doing and being better actively. And I'm going to name those systems, and I'm going to name the systems I participate in. And when that defensiveness comes up, I'm going to question that and say, no, I don't need to defend it, right? Because when you start defending yourself, especially when speaking to someone that you actually oppress, then you are defending the system that makes you the oppressor of that person, even when it's yourself. So shame for me is going to be that first step, like recognizing you have nothing to be ashamed about. I, I just, I, I, here's where we are. Accountability, again, for me, I say this over and over, is neutral. It is what it is. What is wet? What are we going to do about it? What are the next steps, right? We're not going to get caught in that shame spiral loop. We're going to say, this is it. This is truth. How do we move forward? What are we doing, right? That's that repair process inside of relationships. What are we doing in order to repair? Do we want to repair? Okay, we do? Wonderful. Let's go through that process of restoring. So, oh, you know what I did not do? I did not do that for number one. I did not do the reframe. Do you guys want me to do the reframe for number one? I just realized that right now. Or just put it in the replay. You let me know. But I can. I just realized I did not do them. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So with number one, with point number one, I'm so sorry I skipped that, was colonial Christianity created the collective shadow. So the reframe that I offered there was shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. So it actually goes into this, right? Like with the shame. It's about remembering what was never sinful to begin with. The reframes? Yes, Ingrid, here I come. So shadow work wasn't, is it shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering what was never sinful to begin with. You, your body, your desires, your wishes, nothing about you is sinful because you are divine. Like, how can you be sinful when you are a divine being, right? In creating sin in that sort of way created a need for an intercessory. It created the need for you to have to no longer be able to speak to God, creator, your ancestors, whatever your divine was, right? It created that intercessor. You needed a priest. Okay. You needed to go to a man, right? To go and get absolved and to get your penance, to come back to yourself, right? Creating that intercessory is one of the key things of supremacy culture. We see that with capitalism, right? Food, shelter, housing, basic needs, it's an intercessory, right? There's an intercessor. You need money. Oh, how do you get money? You got to produce something, right? And that creating that intercessory creates that separation, right? And then when you start talking about sin as a separation from God, for me, that's it. The sin is colonization, if we're going to talk about it in that Christian language. Creating that separation between the divine is the actual original sin, which would be colonization. Susan says a big part of me recognizing shame and releasing it is noticing how it shows up in my body. Super important to recognize. I'm always about the body cues. What's coming up? Am I feeling flushed? Am I short of breath? Am I feeling anxious? Is my chest tightening? Is my jaw getting tight? What is happening? Vantage Point says, so who is divine and who is not? Everything and everyone is divine. No one is not. To me, that's the greatest loss in colonization is separating it, right? Like, we are all divinely created by whatever measures in which you want to call it divine. There's no way you could dissect people, you could dissect flowers, you could do all of the things, right? Like that was brought forth through that British scientist, and trying to understand life. And you still can't figure that out because that is divine magic. That is majesty. Whatever language you want to use, we are quite literally made up of stardust. right? Like I am a rock, I am a tree, I am the air that you breathe, so are you. None of us are not divine. And I think that if we took that approach to light, that we would treat each other differently. There is no one who's not divine. Even if I don't fuck with you, I don't have to fuck with you. I could still recognize that you are divine. I don't want to, but I have no desire to deal with you. Susan said, co-opting our divinity to control us. Yep. Ingrid said, intercessory. That was the first thing that made me question Catholicism at 17 years old. Right. Like, I think that if you were heavily into Catholicism, like if you had to do all of your sacraments, whatever, I really think that that religion makes you question a lot of things because it's like, what? You gotta sit with a lot, right? Like, especially if you're doing like reading your catechism and doing all of that stuff. I think that it does force a space of questioning. Okay, Vantage Point says, I'm lost. Tell me where you're lost at. And now I see that you said, okay, I understand the point. So are we good? If not, drop it in the comments. All right. So where was that? So I gave you the reframe. Decolonization asks us to turn towards what Christianity as empire told us to bury rather than rushing towards redemption or resolution. The reflection that I offered here is, where do you feel grief in your body when you think about your ancestors, especially those who were forced to convert, assimilate, or disappear? That is something to truthfully sit with when you think about colonial Christianity. Your ancestors, being Irish Catholic was such a deep part of my identity. Um, but then when I had to sit with it, I'm like, oh my God, we were not always Catholic. But we've been Catholic for so long that it is deeply embedded in who we are as a people, especially when I was growing up. And I was like, oh, but that's not always who we were. But that is what colonization and Christianization does to a people group. So I had to sit with that and really recognize, wow, not that's not how it always was. And then that comes with that grief of certain things that will not be able to be returned. Can you move through and accept that this is where we are and still unpack it and decolonize your faith? Lisa said, having to pay the church back for dissolving your union. Crazy work. All of it is just wild. Ingrid says, yes, you learn so much. You say that you've had enough. Yeah, it gets to be like, and that is actually what happened with me with Catholicism. I was like, this is, this is, this is too much. This is too much dissonance. There's too much everything. And I think that Catholicism specifically, because it is that original empire religion, is so dense, is so dense with the violence that it enacted on lands, on people. And when you really start to dissect it, you recognize how absolutely violent it truthfully is. And you have to say, I can't do this. I can no longer participate in this. Now, for me, and I shared this the other day, I love the ritualistic ways of Catholicism. So I kept that, right? I still have a rosary hanging on my altar. I still, have my little frankincense and myrrh thing, and we smoke in the house. So I kept a lot of practices from it, just because also I recognize that it took so much from the original people as well. And so there's something in it that still feels connective for me. Sam says, yeah, learning about Catholicism made me question Christianity and all religious belief, as it should. Vantage Point says, it's an interesting point, but I understand your perspective. Fair enough. Ingrid said yes to the rituals, hearts. Yeah, they're beautiful. They are beautiful. And a lot of people that I know that deconstructed Catholicism kind of kept the rituals in their own ancestral work, but let go of Catholicism as a whole. Ingrid said, there's a church that rings bells at noon. I love it. Oh, yes. I still, like, when I go home and I'm in the Bronx or whatever, and I'll still do the sign of the cross when I hear some bells. Hey, just in case. I too could be wrong. But yes, church bells, hymnals. I can still listen to hymns and do my own spiritual work. It's the same way I refuse to give up Black gospel music. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. Nope. Not doing it. We were listening to Kirk Franklin this weekend. You know what I'm saying? There is just something that's its own ancestral tie and connection too. Again, it is not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It is really about dismantling and questioning and what resonates and what's true and learning your own truth in it. The other reflection prompt that I gave is what parts of yourself were you taught to suppress in order to be good, saved, or acceptable? That's a huge part of Christianization, right? It makes us swallow our own selves whole in order to come out and be something that they want us to be, something that they are designing, right? And manufacturing. Inga said, I have also felt my confirmation saint spiritually that initiation was real. Right. And all of that, when we think about it, it's like initiations, blood work, it's magic at its core, right? Like it is what we have now learned to call magic, right? But what it is actually parts of indigenous spiritual practices co-opted for that Christian colonialism, right? For the Christianization of a nation. So that is why it feels so like, yes, of course, our people did these things, right? Of course they walked around in a circle. Of course they moved in this sort of time frame. Of course they did this sort of work because that would be in alignment with land work and earth worship, right? Like, so that makes sense. So I think that when you start dissecting those things and keeping those parts of it, you'll find what's true. And when you start then doing even some historical dives into your people, right? Who you were before you were white or whatever, you start recognizing those are parts, right? Like that body knows that some ancestral work is happening. So yes, the initiation is real. Talking point 3. Oh, we're almost at time, but here we are. Take some water. Take a sip of your hot drink. What dress? What purse? Who? What's happening? I missed something there, Lise. Okay. Shadow work is collective because colonization was. You cannot heal a system that was designed collectively by healing privately. Did you hear me? Oh, okay, gotcha. Did you hear me? Let me say it again. You cannot heal a system that was designed collectively by healing privately. Okay. That is why I do the community building. That is why I have the spaces. That is why I have the Facebook groups. That's why I'm building out the academy. That is why, God willing, listen, if anybody is listening and it's like, oh my God, I would love to do this in person, help us get the Healing Homestead. Okay. Listen, buy it, co-sign on the loan, give money. It's a nonprofit because this is what we want to do collectively in spaces, right? You can't heal alone. That is a lie. That is a lie from the pits of hell. Like, you can't. You cannot. Supremacy culture demands individualism, demands isolation. You cannot heal privately. Okay. I tell y'all all my damn business because you got to heal out loud, right? When you tell your story, when you show up, you allow other people that space to do it. You provide them a bit of bravery. You provide them a mirror. We are collective people. Right. There are no original thoughts. The only reason why I have intellectual property or legal businesses is because I live in supremacy culture. Okay. But my frameworks, my thoughts, nothing is original. My 15 pillars are Tema Okun, right? I just turned around and expanded upon them. I'm like, oh, how about if I turned around and said, these 15 pillars remove the white supremacy and open the scope to full on oppression and supremacy culture? What about if I recognize how they work somatically with your nervous system and your body and how you experience them? But it's not original frameworks because we are collectively doing the work. We are collective people. We were never meant to be isolated. We were never meant to be separated in the ways that we have been since Christianization. Snow Rover says, I'm here for it. Taylor said, oh, damn. Yeah, you can't heal privately, friend. Lisa says, I'm playing Powerball for liberatory work. Hell yes. Run that. I'm on fire today. Am I, Ariana? Yes, it's Monday. I got coffee and I'm warm. Thank you. So, you can't do this privately. This is why we're here. This is why you guys show up. And I love that you show up. And I super, super, super want you to keep showing up. I'm going to keep showing up. We show up together. Season says, I needed to hear all of this today. Good. Okay. Good. Because I needed to say it all today. Won't he do it? Okay. So, colonization fractured community on purpose. Christian empire replaced kinship with hierarchy. Doctrine replaced relationship, and individual salvation replaced collective care. Take a breath. Individual salvation replaced collective care. We're supposed to be taking care of each other. Okay. But you are so worked up and so involved with your own personal salvation and how you're going to look for the church, for the Christian colonial God, that you're not taking care of your people, yourself, your kin. Yeah, that pause is there on purpose to sit with that for a second, because that's part of that individualism. When we are doing this work and we are watching the intersections of it all and how collective it is, we have to recognize all of those parts. Okay. So again, healing must be ancestral, communal, and embodied. Okay. What does that mean? That means we need to be doing it together. We have to feel it in our bodies, right? Because you can't intellectualize your way out of this. If you could, it would be over with. We would be done, right? Because this is not new thoughts. We've been talking about racism. We've been talking about ableism. We've been talking about homophobia, anti-Semitism. You name the ism, it's been talked about, and it is understood. We understand, most people, that it is wrong, that it is not right, but it needs to be embodied. It needs to be felt. It needs to become a part of who you are, and your life becomes its own testimony of liberation. That is what needs to happen. It needs to be ancestral. You are not a new generation every fucking time you come up, right? You have to recognize that you are sitting here, and that's a lineage that you come. A lot of people turn around, but I got all my ancestors behind me. All mine go before me. Before I walk into a room, before I walk into a space, before I speak, before I do anything, they cleared the path. Okay. If you felt like this word was here for you today, I get that often. And that's because they did it. They pulled out the ethers, they cleared the way, and they said, here you go, Des. This is what you need to kick on today. Somebody needs to hear it. And I love that. Yes. Good. I'm glad that it resonated. Even if it's one. I used to always say, and I stand on it, I will speak to one or a million. It does not make a difference to me. I will carry on the way I am talking now, whether there's right now 31 people on, or 3,100, or 31,000, or one. I won't cancel it. I won't not do it, right? Because somebody needed to hear it. And I trust that. And that is what it feels like when you are doing your ancestral work, right? It needs to be communal. You see how you guys share in your comments? Oh, this, that. You guys talk to each other. That's communal healing. That is not isolation. I was doing one-on-ones for years. And I really sat down and I was like, no. And I started doing one to many, right? And I'm like, come to group. Let's do this together. And I love that. And then it evolved to this, because people need to witness each other. We are intended to witness each other. If you are sitting down feeling like it's just me, I've only done that, that's that shame. That's shame, right? That is that isolation. Oh, I could do this on my own. No, you can't. I mean, you can, but it's like, that we're stronger together. You can absolutely do that work. Some work needs to be done on your own, but it needs to come back to the community, right? Because we all need to pull from that pot. It's the perpetual stew of healing. Love the communal care. Me too, Mia. Susan said, yes, spiritual generational wealth. Absolutely. And like I said, perpetual stew. What are you putting into it? What are you putting into it? What are we taking out, right? So as long as we're all pouring into that space, we can all take from it as well. Small group work is so good for me. I love small group work. It's my jam. The one-to-one feels too heavy and too isolating for me because I'm like, okay, what are you doing with this? Like, what are you doing with it, right? But there are people that do amazing one-to-one work, and I recommend those people. Um, but the group work for me is really truthfully where it's at and where I I love it the most, right? Like where everybody can sit down and really be like, oh yeah, I see you. And we get to see each other. So again, this is why self-work alone cannot undo colonial harm. Notice I said alone, not that you don't need to do self-work, but self-work alone by itself as its only option is not good enough to undo colonial harm. White bodied people in particular are asked to grieve severed European indigenous roots. Okay? You got to. There is such beautiful culture inside of a lot of ethnic European groups. Beautiful, right? And you guys are so wildly connected to the harm that white body people have caused. And yes, I'm not telling you to bypass that either, but there's also a space for you to reconnect and to grieve what you lost in this process too. And in order to do that, you have to turn around and see how beautiful it is. The clothes that they wore, right? The food that they ate. When I used to do this with people, and I mean, I still do this, but like when people were doing the one on one with me, I would tell them to start with music and food. You want to reconnect with your ancestors? Food. Food is the best thing. Music. Your soul will feel your language, your indigenous language, right? Start with those sorts of things, right? You don't have to go all out and I'm going to go learn how to speak Russian. Who the fuck are you practicing with? I mean, is that a realistic goal? Maybe. It but you can listen to some music, right? You can make some borscht. Like, you can do those sorts of things and connect with the food that they ate, the music that they listened to, buy yourself a garment that they had and get close to that and really sit with those things and how it was taken from you. Because this is a non consensual system. It did not ask you, it stripped it from you, it took it from you. When you embody it in that way, you start moving into solidarity, right? Why you see Black people, Black Americans specifically, going so hard about our culture here in the United States of America is because we fought for that. Okay. We fought to create a Black identity because our Africanness was stripped from us violently. We didn't ask for that, right? So we fought for a Black American culture. We fought for our regional cultures. We fought to have our own languages, our dialects, our own spiritual practices, our own music, our own food. And like, no, you can't just take it and say it's yours. That's not how that works. It is, you need to grieve your own self. When you do that, you can then come into alignment and true solidarity. That is how you get solidarity. You can't come on over here and be like, yeah, I'm going to help you. Help me what? When you haven't figured out what the hell happened to you. You have not forged a new identity yet. White body people have not forged a new white identity outside of racism, ableism, homophobia. Like it's power over, not power with, right? So you have to sit with that deep grief of what was lost and what you can actually return to and what cannot be returned to you. Okay. Confront Christianization as cultural erasure, not just belief. That's another thing to do. And reckon with both loss and the complicity without centering yourself, right? Like you have got to turn around and be like, oh, wow, it's not easy being on both sides, right? And like I said, I'm not white, but I am an adult. So I could recognize that in a system of a hierarchy that we live in a supremacy culture, I am my child's oppressor. I am every child's oppressor. Wherever I go in my adult body, I am the oppressor of tiny humans. I didn't ask for that. I don't want to be their oppressor. I think they're cool people. I think they're really cool. Like, they're a wild bunch. The tiny people are. They're funny. They have their own ideas. They have no idea what the hell is going on, but they know what the hell is going on, if you know what I'm saying. But wherever I go, I oppress them, right? That's how hierarchy works. The same with racial oppression, the same with cisgendered oppression, the same with straight. Like we could go through this all. It exists, right? And once you could see that and recognize those patterns, you could start doing the work of dismantling. The reflection that I offer with this is, where are you trying to heal alone what was broken collectively by church, empire, or family systems? Because you're not the only one, friend. You're not the only one. The other reflection I offer is, what kind of community support would make this grief feel less isolating? That's something that you have to ask yourself. We are totally over time today, and that's okay. Wait, I lied. Yep, 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 yep. Okay, so three, we're going to do this really quickly because I know you guys have to go, and it's super long, and I know people don't. It's a lot to take in. So the shadow work is collective because colonization was. You cannot heal a system that was designed collectively by healing privately. Colonization fractured community on purpose. Christian empire replaced kinship with hierarchy. Doctrine replaced relationships, and individual salvation replaced collective care. So healing must be ancestral, communal, embodied. And this is why self-work alone cannot undo colonial harm. The reframe is, decolonization is not about becoming good. Let that go. It's about becoming honest with history, with grief, with what was traded for belonging. Okay. Like, we know, we get it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I get it more than many because I don't have a fractured relationship with my family. I love my family. We've been through hell and back. And we are a close knit, very small family, right? Because my grandparents immigrated in the 50s, but there was no FaceTime during that time. So, like, we're a very small sort of family. Um, so I recognize what it really took to belong, and um, I could still hold them accountable. I could still be honest about that. And I know that it was a forced assimilation, and I know that there are some that did so gleefully, and there are some that were exhausted, like, dealing with, like, a lot of people that can Irish. I cannot talk about anybody else, but a lot of Irish people that came over here by that time, they were fucking exhausted. 600-700 years of colonization. They're coming off of a famine. They're fucking starving to death. They want a better life. They come in and they're like, look, what do we got to do? I'm tired. I don't got nothing left in me. Right. And that is from their own colonization over there, to then come over here and become the oppressor of others. But that is truth. That is what decolonization is going to give you, is that I could acknowledge all of the parts, everybody's suffering in it. So it's not about becoming good. It's about becoming honest. So the reflection is, where are you trying to heal alone? What was broken collectively by church, empire, or family or systems? And what kind of community support would make this grief feel less isolating? I had done that before I did the reframe, so I apologize. All right. We are going to end. I want you to sit with all of this. It's very, very heavy. This entire month is pretty heavy. So I'm trying to insert those somatic breaks, take your time, right? So here's what I want you to remember as you release yourself from the space. Grief exists because love exists, right? Love for our ancestors, love for the futures that we haven't seen yet, and love strong enough to let an old world die. It is okay to let it go. It is okay to grieve what we are letting go, right? And have that hope for the future, and recognize that some of those things, some of those traditions are tied to some really beautiful memories, right? I will not forget my confirmation, right? But I could also recognize that as a whole, that is a problem. Like, as a whole, it is a violent system of oppression, right? But I could still take with me the family joy that day, right? What we ate, where we went, how all of those parts, right? You get to take what you need while you're still releasing other things. All right. So process the grief, move slowly, drink water, deep breaths, move your body. That is it for today. I'm gonna hop off of here, do some more work. The replay will be available by this afternoon. Yeah. I'll make sure of that. I love you guys. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for showing up for really difficult work and doing so enthusiastically. Yay. Bye.